Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Chullin Daf Samech Tes, and we are starting toward the bottom of Samech Tes Amid Beis, about 8 lines or so from the bottom of the page, maybe 9 lines of B'Ma'arava Masnu Hachi. Um, as you will recall, yesterday we had quite a significant Machlokes Amoraim, and the Machlokes Amoraim hinged upon the following case from the Mishnah on Samech Tes Amid Aleph. The Mishnah had indicated that if a behema was in delivery and having a hard time in its delivery, and the people who own the animal were concerned that that animal might die and therefore become a nevela. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to shech the animal. But before that happened, the ubar extended its arm and returned it. Let's say its front leg. It extended its front leg out of the body and then back in. Then the Mishnah used this cryptic language of mutter be'achila. What's mutter be'achila? So Rav, as the Gemara opened, said that that the Aver Atzmo was Aser. So what did the Mishnah mean when it said Mutter Be'achila? That the Ubar, the fetus, was Mutter Be'achila. However, the Aver itself was Aser. Ula completely argued. Ula was knocked out, and seemingly we hold like Rav. With all of that said, we have another version of Rav, and that is where we're starting from today, 9 lines from the bottom. B'ma'arava masnu hachi. In the Ma'arava in Eretz Yisrael, they learned things a little bit differently about Rav. Rav on our Mishnah, had said that the Aver is Asr, the Ubar is Mutter. Look at the language here. Rav Amar Yesh Leida le'evarim, very interesting language, that there is considered to be what is called Leida for Evarim, a birth of a limb. Rav Yochanan Amar Ein Leida le'evar. Okay, what does that mean in our context? Well, if we say Yesh Leida le'evarim, that means that the foreleg that was extended from the body, that's a Leida. So that part of the body can no longer be eaten. The din of ben pakua doesn't apply to that which is already a leda. Conversation's over. So that's what this might mean. The Gemara here asks, "My beinaihu," and it's important to clarify. Sometimes "my beinaihu" means what's the difference between Rav and Rav Yochanan, which was easy to misunderstand. That's not what this means. My beinaihu, what's the difference between version number 1 of Rav that we learned yesterday, which is that ve'ever atzmo aser, the ubar is mutter, the aver is aser, and this new language of yesh leda le'evarim. What is the difference between them? Ika beinaihu lemesar miut aver shebifnim. The difference is whether or not one would have to cut a little bit more of the limb. If we say yesh leda le'evarim, then even if only part of the limb was cut, we treat it as the whole limb. So let's say that it had animals' legs have more parts than human legs, but let's assume that there were 2 parts, like a knee, and you have your calf and you have your thigh, right? So if only the calf was sticking out, it's a calf of a calf. It's just confusing. Let's say your lower half of your leg was extended from the body. According to our Mishnah, okay, say they're cut and move on. But according to Yesh Leida Le'evarim, you have to go all the way up to the hip and cut from there because Yesh Leida Le'evarim, that would be the nafkamina. The Gemara says, Ibayalu, we have a question. According to the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, who in the Ma'arava was taught arguing against Rav, so Rav Yochanan holds Ein Leida Le'evarim. Then what about the following case? Hotzi ha'ubar es yado vehechzira. Let's say that the fetus extended its foreleg and then returned it. V'chazar v'hotzi es yado vehechzira ad sheishlimu lerov mahu. Let's say that an animal extended all of its limbs one at a time. Right leg, left leg, front, right leg, left leg, back. And now we've reached the 51% mark. How do we look at that? Mi amrinan hanafik le ruba. That's considered to be rov. And even though Rav Yochanan holds ein leida le'evarim, okay, that's fine. But once you hit the majority of the body, now we're in a new classification of birth because it's 51%. Odilma kevan de hadar. No, that perhaps maybe that once the animal retracts each leg, the count starts over again because ein leida le'evarim. Chakira to be had. Zakira to be had. That's what the Gemara says is the question here. And im tim salomar that kevan de hadar. Even if you want to say, fine, we're not going to look at the animal and add up all of the volume of the limbs that left the body, all of the 4 legs. We're not going to look at it that way. And kevan de hadar, even if that's true, okay. But then hotzi ubar es yado v'chatcha. let's say that the ubar sticks out its front leg and I cut it. And then the next leg comes out and I cut it. Now it's not a theoretical abstract chakira anymore, right? The original chakira was 51% of the body was passed through the birth canal. And we have to conceptually ask, if it's choser and the animal's whole on the inside, is that considered as though it's born or as though it's not born? Yeah, there is no chazara because every time it stuck out a limb, I removed it. So the animal stuck out its front left leg, cut by the hip. Okay, and then the next hip comes out, I cut at the hip. All four legs are gone now, right? So the Gemara wants to know how we view that. Mi amrinan hanafik le ruba odilma ruba b'vasachas boinan. Even there, unbelievable how far we take this question. Do we say that too is a rove? At least the rove is gone now, and less than 51% of the body is inside. Let's see if we can find an answer to this. Tashma, turning to the very top of Samach Tes Amud Aleph, we have a din from our Mishnah that we started with at the open of the Perek on Samach Tes Amud Aleph. There, the din was Zehaklal Davar Shegufo Aser She'en Gufo Mutter. So let's analyze this. It said in our Mishnah that which was part of the guf is going to be aser, part of the mother. So that case was talking about the tchol and the klayos, that if one were to cut the spleen and it remained inside the body, or cut and separate a piece of the kidney and leave it inside the body, that would be aser. But b'she'ena gufa, referring to the ubar, referring to the fetus, that would be mutter. Says the Gemara, when you say she'en gufa la'asuye mai, what is it that we were talking about when we say that which is not gufa is mutter? And what is that? So lav la'asuye ki hai gavna. Isn't that talking about our case where a leg was extended and we still say that it's going to be mutter? Says the Gemara, no, lo, and this was a case we saw yesterday. La'asuye kalut b'me'e para ve'aliba de Reb Shimon. We're talking about an animal that has no split hooves, that the cow is carrying, and according to Reb Shimon, who holds, de'afal gav de'amar Reb Shimon kalud ben para aser, even though generally speaking, he holds that an animal which has no hooves but is in utero in an otherwise kosher cow, that's going to be aser. When is that true? Hanimili heicha de yatzal avir ha'olam, that's only true once it's born. However, aval b'mei imo shari, says the din of the Mishnah, you're trying to bring me an answer from Zehaklal, from the end of our Mishnah on Samach Tes. No, you can't bring a riot from there, because when that Mishnah said that she'ena gufa mutter, what was that talking about? That was coming to teach us about kalut b'me'ei para, that's mutter. And according to Reb Shimon, he holds that if an animal is carrying and the animal has no split hooves, what is the din? The din is that the animal is completely kosher. So therefore, you can't bring a riot from here. The Gemara ends without giving us an answer to the question. Says the Gemara Samach Tes Amud Aleph, 6-7 lines down. Boy Reb Chananya. Reb Chananya wants to know, Hotzi ubar es yado, but it was ba'azara mutter. We know we have a din of shchutei chutz, right? So if you have an animal in utero that extends its arm outside, but it's an animal that's hektish, and it's in the azara, where do we say the boundary is of that animal? On the one hand, it's in one of the holiest places in the world. At the same time, it left its mother's uterus. So which one do we look at? Migu dahava, do we say that migu dahava mechitza legabe kodshim, havya nami legabe dahai? Do we say that the animal at large, where is the boundary of hektish? It's in the azara, north, south. This we learned already in previous Maseches. O Dilma, do we say, yeah, that's nice and cute that you're in the azara, but that has no bearing on the uterus, on the fetus, because after all, Dilma legabe dahai la mechitza, mechitzas ubar imohu. How do we look at the mechitza? Where is the line? Where is the threshold that this baby has to cross to make the leg usher? If it's an animal that's hektish in the azara, does the whole room get treated like the space where the animal belongs? And even if the leg extends out of the birth canal, we'll say no problem, it didn't leave the zone and you're good. Or no, do we look at the birth canal? So Amar le Abaye, v'tibay lach kachim kalim b'Yerushalayim. Why did you ask only about the azara? If you have kachim kalim that can be eaten throughout all of Yerushalayim, why didn't we ask the same thing? Kodshim kalem b'Yerushalayim. My time alo kame bailach. Why didn't you ask this question by kodshim kalem in Yerushalayim? It's the same question, right? It's kodshim can only be eaten in the Azara, but kodshim kalem can be eaten elsewhere. Why did you only ask about kodshim in the Beis Hamikdash? You should have asked about kodshim kalem Yerushalayim. Says Gemara, because obviously the mechitzas ubar imahu. Where is the Rubicon for the baby? It's the mother. Stop. You've gotten abstract already, thinking that the room of the Azara is considered to be equivalent to a new boundary for the baby, and leaving the uterus wouldn't have caused a problem. Hachanami, by our case too, mechitzas ubar imohu. Good theoretical question. The Gemara answers, as we see here, that the only time when a leg becomes usher is when it exits the birth canal. Doesn't matter if it's hektish and kachim or kachim kalam Yerushalayim, we don't care. A third of the way down, Samach Tes Amud Aleph, another question. Boy Ilfa. Ilfa wants to know. Hotzi ubar es yado bein simin lesimin mahu. Let's say that the fetus extends its foreleg outside of the birth canal while the mother was being shechted. Only the first simin had been shechted. So let's say it takes 4 strokes of the blade to cut each siman. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm done with the kana. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Finish one siman. Animal extends its arm out of the birth canal. And then the shochet continues, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it hits the second of the siman mahu. Mi mitztaref siman rishon l'siman sheni l'tare midei nevei lolo. Do we say that we remove the nevela status of the limb, yes or no? The lumdus of this question we learned yesterday. We know that there's a din called Aver Min Achai. Aver Min Achai has tuma just like nevela. But here, we were only halfway through the process of removing nevela. The way we get rid of nevela of an animal is cutting both of its simanim, if it's a behema. Obviously, chickens are different, but for a behema, you have to cut through both. Our case is the gray area in the middle. He cut one siman, the animal instantly extended its foreleg out of the birth canal, and then the shochet did the second siman. How do we look at that? Do we say that the two are mitztaref, even though it's interrupted by the hotza of the leg? Yes or no? So says the Gemara, Amarava kal v'chomer. This is a difficult kal v'chomer. Im hoil lo siman rishon le siman sheni lehatiro be'achila. If it's true that first siman when it's done, and then we do the second siman, those two acts combine in order to be matir achila, lo yoilo letare midei nevela. Shouldn't it at least be enough to reduce the status from nevela to simply being not kosher? A little bit of a difficult svar. I'm not sure I totally understand the kal v'chomer, because it's a little bit apples and oranges. What do you mean, being matir be'achila? The mother? And then you're saying that by the animal that therefore it's reduced nevela. I'm not a little bit difficult. A little difficult.
Like there are gradations. Veils step up. Trefers a step up from the
step down. Step down
from trefers.
Yeah.
There are gradations. But
I don't understand the kal v'chomer part. Yeah. I get the gist. I just don't. It's hard to follow the flow. Meaning, siman rishon to siman sheni were mitzaref to be matir achila. Okay, but our case was where siman rishon was interrupted by a foreleg. So I must be misunderstanding. Rashi, im mitzaref siman rishon l'sheni lahatir be'achila kol ha'ubar ve'habehema. V'lo amrinan shchita chalukahi. We allow the first shchita, the first siman shechted, and the second one to be combined. So too, even if it's interrupted by the foreleg extending outside the birth canal, we say the same thing. Okay, this requires research. Next question, 4 lines before the wide lines on Samach Tes Amud Aleph. This is just a thick Gemara. I hope we get to where I want to today, and if not, we'll just pick up tomorrow night with more. Says the Gemara, Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mahu lachush lizaro. I'm going to cheat and tell you what this means because the words are difficult on their own. Do we have to worry about the child? What does this mean? So let's say there is a ben pakua, and the ben pakua extended its arm outside of the birth canal and retracted it, and then the mother was shechted. So the halachic status of that animal is that the ubar is kosher, but the leg cannot be eaten. Now, let's say this ben pakua grows up and has a child. We know the father has a problem with the leg that was extended during his birthing process. Does his child have the same problem? Fascinating.
Does the uber have to be an uberet?
Gender-wise?
Gender-wise, or is it a male and the female and male? So I assume it's a female, right?
What do you assume is female?
The ubar,
The parent or the
the
child?
child is a female. That's what it's saying, right?
Why did you assume that?
Because it's talking about the child that that animal has. It means it's female.
Might be wrong, but Lazaro.
No. Well, I'm fascinated that you said that. The Gemara is going to discuss this. It was just that was Givaldic. That's great. The Gemara is going to talk about whether we care about who the father is of the child by human beings and halacha. I mean, the father's halachic relationship to his child is a chazaka, but to his mother is a vadai. So do we care by animals bichlal? Do we care at all? So we're going to discuss this right now. That's why I was intrigued by your question. Have you learned Shas before? And you were just flexing a little bit, which is great. That's fine. Or no, I'm glad you brought it up. So says the Gemara, we need to pick this apart. Hey, chidami. Ilema de azal abehema ma'al yasa. Let's say that it was the child of a regular parent, not a ben pakua. My area haid ispe iser yotze. Why then are we talking about a ben pakua that has a bad leg? Because really, afilu ben pakua de al manami, even a regular ben pakua, we have a problem eating. This is our first intro. This is going to ruin my ben pakua burgers business. This is our first problem with the ben pakua. What's the problem? The amar of misharshia l'divrei haomer choshishin lezera ha'av. If in fact we care who the father is, the cow father, the bull, and this bull, when it was a calf in utero, extended its front left leg, let's say. If that's true, then ben pakua, even if he doesn't extend his leg, ben pakua haba al behema ma'al yasa havlad ein lo takana. If you have a ben pakua male and it impregnates a regular female, the child cannot be eaten at all. So the mother is regular, the father is ben pakua. So says the Gemara, in that case, there's no takana. Rashi goes into the details here as to why there is no way to solve this problem, because there's no din of shchita, because it's a ben pakua, and now if you cut the simanim, what even are you doing? The animal has no, so you're kind of like stuck in the twilight zone. The way that Rashi looks at it is that it says if the simanim have already been cut when the mother was shechted. So fine, there's just two different approaches in Rashi. So therefore, why did you present a case where the leg was broken? Even if it was a regular ben pakua, I wouldn't have been concerned. Lo tzricha, says the Gemara, de'azal aben pakua de kavase mai. Do we say Aver molid Aver v'chatichle v'shari? Do we say that the son is just like the father? If the father had a bad front left leg, so does the child. O Dilma, no, that's not how childbearing works. Mivalbil zare, that we'd assume that yes, he impregnated and had a child. That's true, but the tumor of the leg doesn't go to the leg of the child and become tameh. That we now have science. We know DNA and there's a genome and there's something scripting how the body is going to grow, how long, how tall you'll be, how short you'll be, the color of your eyes, the color of your hair. We know this. I mean, we're
Cutting off.
it doesn't change a blessed thing. And the Gemara is going to give this example in a second. Hadar Amar, Pshita de Meval Bel Zare. Obviously, it's not leg is to leg, eye is to eye. How do we know? Dim Kain, Suma Yolit Suma. If the parents are blind, then guess what? According to the Svara, that maybe we should be choshesh for the leg of the father, that the leg of the child is tameh. No, that's not how childbearing works. If the father is blind, the child has to be blind? Pasha, that's not true. The kitea, yolid kitea, if this guy had a severed hand, the kid's going to have it? No, he's going to be a regular person. Obviously, we don't look at it in such a binary way that the father's front leg was tameh, so too the child. Obviously not. So that can't be what Rabbi Yirmiyah's question was when he said mahu lachush lezaro. It just can't be. It's not rational to assume that his question was that if the father's front left leg was tameh, so too the child. So now let's try again. We're 4 or 5 lines into the wide lines, a little bit more than halfway down. What really was he asking? Behema be'alma, a regular animal. Lav mikoach chala v'dam ka'asya. Hold on one second. Chelev, I should say. Chelev v'dam ka'asya. We have a cow. Cows have chelev on them. Chelev is usher to eat. Cows also have blood in them, and blood is usher to eat. So how can I ever eat a cow? Kol hayotze minat tameh tameh. So, and still visharya, right? We have animals that are treif all the time, and on their own, we could never eat them. We have to remove the gid anosha, all the different things, right? So the Gemara says over here that if that's true, then why do we allow animals to eat them? Hachanami loshna. Maybe over here by the bad leg also, the child would be perfectly kosher because who cares if the father has a tameh leg? The father also has tameh blood, and the father also has tameh chelev. The fact that the father is tameh in certain ways does not matter. It just doesn't matter. Oh, Dilma, no, maybe that's not the case. Perhaps we should say that Trei Isure Amrinan. When we say that I'm allowed to eat a cow, I can tolerate the fact that the mother has two Isurim, that she has Chelev and she has Dam. But maybe that's it. If it had a third Tuma, then maybe the animal is now going to not be kosher anymore because Tlasa, Lo Amrinan. If it had a third Psul, let's say, for example, the front left leg was Tameh of the father of that baby or of the mother of that baby. So how do we look at that? So this is the second Havamin of what the question is of Rabbi Yirmiyah. The first question was, do we say that the leg of the father that's Tameh carries down to the leg of the child? We rejected that. This question is, the fact that we say that Chelev and Dam are usher in the parent and we still allow ourselves to eat the child or to shechta properly and eat it, so then we should say the same thing even if the leg of the father is bad. It doesn't transfer down. Yes or no? Do we say that 2 Isurim we can tolerate but 3 we can't? Or Dilma Loshna? Do we not say that? So says the Gemara, Uleman. Whose shita would be that there's 3 Isurim? And the Gemara is going to paint a picture that it's not anyone that we know of. Uleman, who is that according to? Either Reb Meir. According to Rav Meir, Isser Chelev Vidam Ika Isser Yotze Leka. Can't be him. He certainly doesn't hold that there's 3 Isurim in the parent. Why? Because while he does hold that there's an Isser of Chelev and Dam, he does not hold that there's an Isser of Yotze on the leg. Against our Mishnah, by the way. Against our Mishnah. Rav Meir doesn't hold a Ben Pakua, as we will soon see. And either Rabbi Yehuda, Isser Yotze Ika, he does have a problem with the leg, but Isser Chelev Leka, but he doesn't have a problem with the Chelev. Discussion about the word Vidam, we're not going to get into that now. So, both according to Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, none of them would ever say there's a scenario of 3 parameters of Isser, of Chelev, Dam, and the leg. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir don't get to the number 3. They each have 1 or 2. The Tanya, we have a brisa, it should say the Tanya at least. Gid hanoshe noeg bishlil. If you have an animal that was shechted, so we have the same isser of gid hanoshe. We know in the hind legs, the sciatic nerve that runs down the back leg, that is usher to eat, noeg bishlil, even if it's a ben pakua. Even though the mother was nishchat, there is still an isser of gid hanoshe. The chelbo usher, and it's regular, chelev is always going to be usher. Classic Rav Meir, Divi Rav Meir, because he doesn't hold a ben pakua. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that if there is a ben pakua, ein nohu bishlil. Gid hanoshe is mutter. Gone for the ben pakua. Why? Because it's like a limb of the mother now. The uber is yerach imo, and therefore when the mother is nishchat and there was a child inside, you can even eat. This is so mechudash. It makes sense in a certain way. You can even eat the gid hanoshe. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, we do believe in ben pakua, and the isser of gid hanoshe dissolves. V'chel bo mutter. Why v'chel bo mutter? Same thing. Ubar yerach imo. Ben pakua was nitar with the shchita of the mother. So now what we see from here is that there is no shita that holds that there are these 3 flaws of chelev, dam, and yotze in the case of ben pakua. So the question falls apart altogether. Our second approach in Rav Yirmiyah. Ella says the Gemara, you're right. We've been learning this wrong the whole time. Kol mikoach lo amrinan. We don't say that because the father had X, therefore the son has X. We don't say that. Vishari should be a vav. Let's try again to understand what the status is of Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. Mahu likmoa es chalavo. What about drinking the milk from the child over the one who had the bad leg. Chalav de alma lo ke'ever min achai dami v'shari. By the way, the fact that we drink milk now, where does milk come from? A living animal. We don't look at that as Ever Min Achai. If I took a bite out of the shoulder of a living animal, that's mamish and Isser Doraisa. That's Ever Min Achai. I can drink the milk. Mutter v'mutter all of a sudden. The Gemara in Bechoros on Daf Vav will discuss this in I don't know, 100 days. I don't even know when. We'll discuss this a little bit more. Why is milk mutter? We're going to discuss this. Good. So says the Gemara, we clearly don't have a problem with drinking milk from an animal that's Ever Min Achai. So, Hainami Loshna. Good. So then you can still eat the animal of this, you can still eat the bad leg of this animal. Odilma, no. Hasam isle takanta. With the animal that we drank milk from, maybe the reason we can drink the milk is because in theory I could shecht it. But if the animal had a bad leg, isle takanta li'isur b'shchita. But hacha, when there is a bad leg, less takanta li'isur b'shchita. And the answer is teku. We don't know the answer to Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. We tried 3 versions. The third version was, can we drink the milk of the child who had a bad leg? Do we say that the parent could be nishchat? Yes, no, maybe. And the Gemara answers with teku.
You got the kana halfway and then the leg comes out. What happens?
If you got the kana halfway and?
Cut the kana halfway and then the leg comes out. And then he cuts the rest. Anything happen or no?
If it was rov kana, then that was the case we discussed earlier, and that would still be usher to eat. It just wouldn't be a nevela. Because we need rov, minimum. We paskin that you need rov of both simanim. So if I did 51% of the kana, and then the leg came out, and then I even stopped cutting the kana, and I moved over to the veshet and did 51%, nevela would be gone. According to the shita that we hold, that you only need rov of each siman. If you did less than rov, you have other problems. your animal's kosher, but you're not done with your shchita. No, we discussed that earlier about the kana only being partially cut. Okay, chotech me ubar. We're going to now talk about this fundamental din of ben pakua minalan. Where do we know this from? Fascinating drasha. Amazing how Chazal knew this. Dichsi v'chol behema mafreses parsa. If you have the psukim on the side. V'chol behema mafreses parsa v'shasa shtei prosas malas geira ba behema osa tochelu. Look at this drasha. Behema ba behema. The animal that's inside the animal. These two words are not next to each other in the pasuk. But again, how did Chazal know to do this? Moshe Kibbutz Torah Misem Sarli Yoshua. They must have had some type of Masorah. The reason that we know that a ben pakua is mutter is because the two words of behema and ba behema were in the same pasuk. When you put them right near each other, I'll say it in Hebrew. Ani medaber al ha behema sheba behema. The animal that's inside the animal, right? So here, what do we see? The Rabbi says havlad. Is that if the mother was nishchat and there happened to have been a child inside in utero, says the Gemara mutter. If that's true, that the ubar is considered to be like the mother, it's a functional animal of its own accord. Elamayata yamirubo. If somebody tried to do tmura, granted it would be usher to do tmura, but the mechanics of tmura only work under certain circumstances. Maybe it should work by a vlad. But if that's true, Allah matnan, why do we have a mishnah that is in Maseches Tmura that says ein memirin lo evarin beubarin velo ubarin beevarin velo evarin veubarin beshleimin velo shleimin bahen? Why do we not allow for the mechanics, not allow halachically because it's usher, but why don't the mechanics of Tmura work with a vlad? They should. Ella says the Gemara, you're right. The vlad is a vlad, it's not a behema. Ella amar kra b'chol behema the Rabbo says havlad. We're being mechadesh that even though it's not a behema, we're saying that it's going to be included. Yachi says the Gemara, if that's true that we have a ribui, then afilu chotech min atchol min aklayos nami. Then we should also have assumed that if I were to do surgery on the mother and cut part of its spleen off and leave it in the body, and the same with the kidneys, well, I should assume that that's also mutter because v'chol behemas l'rabos. Allah matnan. Why did we learn chotech min ha'ever she b'me'eha mutter be'achila from min ha'ubar? Excuse me. If I cut off a limb of the ubar and leave it inside, I do in utero surgery and leave it there, no problem. But if I cut from the mother min atchol ve'aklayos aser be'achila. Why would we say that? It should all be included. Says the Gemara, Amar Kra Osa. The reason why we don't include that is because of another drasha. What does the word osa teach us? Shlema v'lo chasera. The only time the mother can be consumed is if she is shlema. But if I cut part of her body off, then that ruins her. That's not allowed. Elameata, if this is true that we have a ribui, okay, I understand why you can't eat from the tchol and the kleos. I get it. So I just don't understand that if we have this otherwise assumed principle that the b'chol behema is l'rabos esavlad, then hashochet es habehema. Let's say I shecht an animal, and then I cut open I knew the animal was pregnant. I shechted it, and then when I cut open the belly, umatza is demus yona. I see inside that there's an animal that looks like a bird, looks like a dove. Tishtari. I should assume that the shechita worked for that animal. Alama, why did we say Alama Amar Rabbi Yochanan that Ashochet Sabahema Matzabah Dmus Yona Aser B'Achila? Why would we say that? It should have been a ribui, all included, just like the ubar was allowed and included behema ba behema. We should say the same exact thing about this weirdly shaped animal that a cow delivered that happens to look like a bird, even though on its own it's definitely not kosher. Why wouldn't we say it's kosher? Why do we say it's Aser B'Achila? Says the Gemara, because what we need to do is make sure, ba'ina pirasos vileka. We need to make sure that at the very least, that when a cow is having a baby, that it has prasos, that it has hooves, and a yona doesn't have hooves. So that's a minimum. Maybe we should say that a kalut, that an animal that has closed hooves should not be kosher because it doesn't have split hooves. Says the Gemara, no. Hatana de Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Parsa b'behema tochlu. This is a play on words based on the pasuk. You can look at this based on the pasuk. It's quite a unique drasha where we pull words from different parts of the pasuk, and what we assume from here is that any type of parsa would be kosher. So therefore, whereas a yona has no hooves and therefore would not be kosher, even if it was found in utero without it having been born before the mother was shechted, that would not be allowed because it doesn't have a hoof. A kalut would be mutter, even though it doesn't have a split hoof. But it has one hoof at all. As long as it has even a regular hoof, that's considered to be a reasonable assumption. And therefore, the kalut b'mei para would be mutter. Rav Simi Bar Ashi disagrees. Amar la'olam kidika amris me'ikara. I disagree. Really, we need to go back to the original answer of behema and ba behema. We initially asked that question and offered that as a mari makom for ben pakua, and we questioned it from the fact that tumura doesn't work. And says Rav Simi, you want to tell me that there's no tmura? Hamani, that must be Rav Shimon. And that's okay. We have an answer as to why it would be the case that behema and ba behema is still a good drasha and why tmura wouldn't work. Why wouldn't tmura work according to Rav Shimon? Temakish tmura lemaiser. He compares tmura, the act of changing the status of kedusha from one animal to the next, which in most cases is aser, and he compares that to maiser behema. Ma maiser behema. Just like Meiser Behema doesn't apply to limbs and doesn't apply to fetuses. So therefore, we see this hekesh between the world of Tmura and the world of Meiser Behema, and therefore we see why Tmura doesn't work even by an ubar, and therefore we fall back not on the drasha of Vichol, but rather on the drasha of Behema ba Behema. Umina Timra. Let's learn some Mari Makomos as to how we know this to be true. Says the Gemara. So take a look at Rashi. Umina Timra, a third of the way down. Taha ein memiren Reb Shimon he. How do we know that Reb Shimon was the one who holds this way? Because Ditnan, we have a Mishnah also from Maseches Tmura, and a little bit later in this Masechta. Amar Reb Yossi. Reb Yossi says the following. V'halo b'mukdashin, with things that have been sanctified, ha'omer ragla shel zu ola kula ola. If a person says, I'm sanctifying the leg of this animal, the whole animal is sanctified. Af k'sheyomar regel shel zu tachas zu te kula tmura tachteha. If you say that this regel for that animal, then the tmura absolutely works. Now, the way that this sentence is structured, Rav Yossi's sheet, is that it sounds like he's responding to someone. Look at this at the syntax. He says, Rav Yossi, v'halo b'mukdashin, but wait 1 second. It seems like with these holy things that if you're makdish the leg, the whole animal. What does that imply? That someone else he was talking to doesn't hold that way. And therefore, leman kamahadar le. Who was he responding to? Ilema l'Reb Meir v'Reb Yehuda. Mi islahu hai svara. Would they ever say that a regel of an animal could be makadesh only the regel? After all, v'hatanya yachal, you might have thought that ha'omer ragla shel zu ola te kula ola. Talmud Omar kol asher yitim mimenu l'Hashem yeh kodesh. mimenu kodesh, only part of it's kodesh, velo kula kodesh. Yachol teitze lechulin. Maybe he would have held that because only part of it is holy, then we should, make all of it unholy. Talmud Omar Yehia Bav Yasa Tehei. HaKetzad, what should I do with this animal that's only partially holy? Just the leg is holy. Timacher letzarche olos v'dameh chulin. You should sell it for the needs of chulin, and then the monies are then going to be treated as chulin. I mean, you should sell it for olos, and then the money is going to be chulin. Chutz midmei aver sheba tibi Reb Meir v'Reb Yehuda. So this can't be who Reb Yossi in the Mishnah was responding to. So maybe Reb Yossi, Reb Shimon, Omer Minayin, Omer Ragla Shalzu Ola Tekula Ola. Maybe Reb Shimon agrees with Reb Yossi that the leg that he says, which is of the Ola, you might have thought it's all going to be an Ola. Talmud Omer Yehia LeRabo says Kula Leman Ilu Reb Meir Reb Yehuda we saw Meislu Haisvara Elalab. It must be that it's Reb Shimon, and therefore we have our Mare Makom that there is no Tmura by. That there is no tmura by trumas by tmura or by meiser behema. Says the Gemara, lo, that's not correct. Rather, Rabbi Yossi taima denafshei ka'amar. Rabbi Yossi's comment that he made 10 lines down, Ditnan, Rabbi Yossi b'halo b'mukdashin, he was not talking to someone, even though it sounds like he's talking to someone. He wasn't talking to someone, so therefore, this is not a raya. And as we conclude over here, and we're going to stop right here at the Mishnah, what we're seeing is this. We're trying to figure out if this answer could be true, this second answer of the Gemara, that really the reason why there's no Tmura is because we're comparing it to Meiser Behema, and we don't really have a good source for that. So we'll stop right here. Mir Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up with the Mishnah on the bottom of Samach Tes Amud Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.